My name is John Crichton, an astronaut. A radiation wave hit, and I got shot through a wormhole. I'm lost in some distant part of the universe on a ship, a living ship, full of strange alien life forms.
So Rockne, tell me about the origin of Farscape, where the idea come from.
Well, the idea came from, well, actually, the absolute origin of Farscape began with the Jim Henson Company. Brian Henson had just taken over. His dad had passed away, I think, a couple of years earlier, and he'd taken on the mantle of running this company. And in addition to the kind of family fare, which Henson was obviously famous for, Brian wanted to kind of reach out also in terms of the grip of the company and show what they were capable of beyond just kind of typical family fare. I think the easy shorthand at the time was kind of like the cantina scene in Star Wars. Can we do something as kind of bold and exotic for television as that, but bring it to the small screen? So I went away and kind of thought about it and came back, you know, having had this kind of carte blanche handed to me, at least in this initial meeting. And I came back with the notion of, if we can do aliens, let's do a world almost entirely of aliens, where essentially the only human in the entire show was the lead, the main character, and the only other people in the show that looked at all like him were the villains. And so Brian embraced the idea, and we went in and we pitched it at Fox Television, and they bought it. They loved the idea and wrote a script. They loved the script. Problem was, in television, especially if you're doing science fiction, you have to build everything. You have to build the ship. You have to build the entire world. You have to build the characters, all the animatronic characters, as well as prosthetics. I mean, it's just an enormously expensive proposition, and we couldn't afford to just shoot a pilot and build all those things without the expectation that there'd be a series. So we kind of crunched the numbers, and we found that we needed, I think it was 11 episodes to kind of essentially amortize the cost of making a pilot. And Fox at the time, this is early 90s, and Fox was still in the kind of Married with Children. They were doing well with some very select shows. I don't think X-Files was on yet.
Well, the
and
Simpsons,
really. Yeah, exactly. But again, not shows that were expensive at all. Or at the time, I believe Fox was ordering. They'd order a pilot and look at that, and then they'd order like 6 episodes at a time. So it wasn't 11 episodes was a big deal. So, but because they liked the script, they kept trying to make it fit for them. So they ordered some backup scripts. So we wrote 3 additional backup scripts for them. They really liked those, but could not get past the ordering of 11 episodes. We kept pitching it higher and higher up the organization, and literally ended up pitching it to Rupert Murdoch. So I shook the then $6 billion hand or whatever and pitched it to Rupert. Still just could not get them past that. Everybody liked it, but they just couldn't get it past. So we just said, okay, it's not happening at Fox, and we went and pitched it everywhere else, and people just couldn't kind of, it's, as you know from having now seen the show, it's a very unusual piece of material and very exotic in that there's only essentially one human, or one heroic human at the center of all these aliens and creatures. So Brian, much to his credit, never gave up, and we had what you call maquettes, little models of the characters that the Henson Company had made. And so every few years we'd trot them out, the maquettes and the scripts, and we'd go in and pitch it or talk it up somewhere, and just nobody was quite ready to bite. And then 98, 99, I guess, television came up with what I say they had to come up with in order for us to get on the air, which was a show completely dedicated to speculative fiction or science fiction, and the Sci-Fi Channel. And Rod Perth was president and running Sci-Fi at the time, and so Rod read the scripts, the pilot script and the backup scripts that we had, and brought us in and said, "I love this," and he goes, "I'll give you 22." He was just going to go for it. And I remember Brian and I went out, left his office, Rod Perth's office, and hugged each other and said, "Now how do we do this?" I mean, that was the other part of it. So because nobody had ever attempted anything like this before. I mean, in terms of regular television production for a cable network, meaning that there were definite, budget parameters, and how to do that on a daily basis with in particular the animatronic characters.
Yeah, this isn't like humanoids. These aren't just like Kirk meets a woman and she happens to be green, or even Babylon 5. A lot of that stuff was prosthetics. You know, you had somebody with like a strange brow in Star Trek, or you had somebody with like, you know, all sorts of stuff around his head. But these are Muppets.
Yeah. No, they're incredibly elaborate. The two main characters in the show, animatronic characters, were Rigel, little Rigel, and then Pilot. And I wanted Rigel. I told Brian, I said I want Rigel to be as small as possible, but still be fully able to be articulated. I said, you know, he's Rigel's Dominar Rigel, so he's a ruler. So my joke was I want him to be like 12 inches high. Okay, that was kind of thing. And Brian goes, he can't quite be 12 inches, but we'll make him as small as we can. On the other end of the spectrum, the Henson Company had produced for ABC, I believe, a half-hour sitcom called Dinosaurs. And there was a character in that which was Richfield. It was like some giant T-Rex or something, and was huge, a huge, you know, animatronic character.
Honey, I'm home.
And Brian said, okay, in contrast to Rigel being the smallest we can make him, I want Pilot, the other animatronic character, to be really large. So I believe Pilot, when fully all his arms were working and all of articulated, had 9 operators.
Wow.
And Rigel, I think, just commonly had 3 or 4. And the fun with Rigel in writing him was it was always better to keep him in one place. So if you notice in essentially all the episodes, but I mean, you know, we would always, the mission was to find a spot to get him stuck in the mud, to get him stuck in an air vent. So he was in one place, so it'd be easier to kind of operate. I was very proud that I came up with the notion of a throne sled, though, because I knew we'd want to be able to, if we wanted to move, we wanted to be able to get him obviously in eye line. Plus, he couldn't walk. One thing, he couldn't walk, but also to get him at eye level with the other characters. So off he went. And I was very gratified when I watched the first 3 Star Wars movies, 1, 2, and 3, that they had Yoda on essentially a throne sled. So I thought, okay, go.
So in getting Rigel stuck, it started providing actual plot ideas. Yeah. There's that one storyline where Rigel is used to kind of, there's a hole in Moya, and his butt is sticking out in a vacuum, and he's literally keeping all the oxygen on Moya. Yeah. And he's complaining the entire time. Yeah,
but it's I mean, it became a significant plot point, but it all was born from, okay, where are we going to get Rigel trapped this week?
If you'd be so kind to get me free, I'll be on my way.
So was Farscape ahead of its time?
I think it created, I think it kind of created its own time.
Right.
Because, like I say, there really isn't anything, it wasn't, to be ahead of its time, it would have to have led to other things like it.
Right. It was a precedent that wasn't followed.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, it was because the fans who have found it and continue to find it, they tend to be very, very passionate about it. And I think the thing that they're very passionate about is the fact that it isn't like anything else that they've seen, and that it's very edgy, and the characters all act and react in ways that are very truly true to them, and we were very careful that we never protected any character. Everybody really could have a very, very strong personal agenda, and they held to that, and we didn't break that. So, which makes characters incredibly edgy. You're talking about Pilot, who's, again, superficially, is a very touching, helpful character, but he had all sorts of edges to him. And there's an episode in season 2, The Way We Weren't, where we discovered that he actually got aboard Moya by, giving up another one of his species, another Leviathan. Not a Leviathan, but another of
pilot.
Another pilot, to in service of his own desires. And it's interesting. It just made him a richer, more rounded character.
And it's a great moment when a young pilot is looking up at the stars, and and I think you guys touched on it in the comic books. In the comic books, you actually got to see more pilots. You actually got to see Hynerians, swimming around in Hyneria. Stuff that in the TV show is constrained as the budget may have been, with all these needs to do prosthetics and to have puppeteers, and then on top of just being science fiction with all its art direction and effects. In the comic books, you start to actually get to see some of that. You wrote the comic books. You had a hand in writing the comic books.
I did all the stories for the comic books,
Wow.
and then Keith Canada did the actual scripting of the comic books. And it was a great synergy because he knows the shows incredibly well. Had the voices down. He'd done one of the novelizations, so it was a perfect kind of teamwork there. But it was fun for me in terms of developing the stories because it did allow me to continue the saga of Farscape. And as you noticed, the very first, I think we did them in groups of 4. The stories were kind of a set of 4 comics at a time. And the first we do is go to Hyneria because we could do that. In the show, there was we had one episode where we introduced a female Hynerian, which was obviously just the Rigel skin with lipstick and longer hair, and but that's the extent of what we could do. And in the comic, we could go to where the pilots were and see that they actually and see what kind of the lower half of them was, which we obviously weren't able to do in the television series.
Was that satisfying doing the comics, or was that was that going to be what season 5 was, or did you find yourself with a new art form saying, you know what, we can actually go wider, or we can go in a different direction because we're not constrained by budget?
Yeah, because it was a different form, it allowed me to kind of branch and actually do things that I know we could never have done in the television series in terms of the scale and scope of the adventures. The comic book allowed us to be much larger.
The show actually has some pretty big moments. The end of season 3, you have an enormous water act where Scorpius is sitting there and there's just water flooding around. Like there were some giant set pieces, especially in some of those 2 or 3 part stories. Were those things that you just had to write around and say, okay, we're spending a ton of budget on this 1 or 2 episodes, so this one's gonna be we travel to a planet and we just maybe do something concept wise with time travel or cloning?
We had those discussions all the time, and we never quite found let's do this is the one. This is the bottle show. This is the one where we rest. We just didn't do that. And one of the things there were a couple of factors that just made Farscape what it was. And one of them was getting on board on the Sci-Fi Channel when we did, when they were really looking for a flagship show, something that truly a show that you couldn't get anywhere else. It truly was very specific to the genre and to their network. That was incredibly important. But one of the other huge factors was shooting in Australia, which started out as simply a financial consideration. But because of the financial arrangement that was made, we weren't a Australian co-production. We were essentially an Australian production. So we, unlike other shows at the time, like Xena and Hercules and shows like that kind of shot down that hemisphere, but they would use it as a set. So they would shoot those shows, they'd write them here, send the scripts down there, they'd shoot them, the film would come back and they'd post it here. We did everything down there. The entire show was done down in Sydney, and we had at our disposal an incredible array of exotic thinking artisans. People in all the departments, and these are the minds, the Australian mind, the kind of crazy minds that that did Road Warrior, and really bring a really unusual kind of outlaw attitude to things, and so that was huge to the look and timbre of the show. But the very fact that the only American actor regular on the show was Ben Browder.
Talk about your American abroad. He can't even get McDonald's at this end of the universe.
You have an American actor who's stepping into a foreign land with people with accents different than him, and more importantly, culturally very different, and with a different kind of acting training style. And I think that informed the show as well. It's it's a kind of intangible that you can't say, oh, let's do this on purpose. But I think it just really worked. Just on a very prosaic level, at the time we were shooting, the Australian dollar was $1 to the American 50 cents, so it was 2 to 1, and so we got a lot more bang for our buck, in terms of what our budget was. We essentially took our budget and take it down and turn it into Australian dollars, and you had double the amount. So that was very, very important to us as well.
What were some of the influences for Farscape? What were some of the things that you maybe grew up and you were like, I'd love to revisit that?
Well, my favorite writer, he happens to be genre, but he just passed away recently, was Richard Matheson. And what Richard did that just spoke to me as a reader initially, and then I kind of carried with me, was that notion of exotic, odd things happening to a common man. So in creating Farscape, my sensibility was far more kind of aimed toward the characters and almost like coming at it from as an outsider, if you will, which I think kind of gave it this other kind of level.
In an accessibility.
I think that was a side product of it.
Well, I mean, you didn't have to be a science fiction fan to enjoy Farscape. I wasn't a hardcore science fiction fan, but having someone, who wasn't a space cadet or this and that, I mean, he's almost more of a Han Solo. And I mean, that's your commentary on science fiction. It's like John Crichton is commenting on science fiction, on the ridiculousness of a lot of the stuff that he experiences right off the bat. And would you say that there's a bit of Rockne O'Bannon in that?
Certainly, yeah. Me and all the writers, when you're in the room, as you're referencing things and you're trying to get your point across, you're constantly referencing other movies and making funny comments on them, and often putting into the mouths of the characters as you're kind of pitching a scene. And I kept telling the writers, I said, no, we take that and put that into the show. You know what I mean? And I don't care if they're references that we get, then trust the audience to get it. And the audience doesn't go, I don't understand that reference, I'm going to turn it off. So when Crichton, refers to the Aurora chair as the comfy chair, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, if people don't get it, they're not going to like go, I hate this, But those who know the Monty Python reference they'll get it. As we were discussing it, I think we just started to refer to the Aurora chair as the comfy chair, just as a matter of pitching it. And I would always say, no, put that in Crichton's mouth. And I think that imbued the show with a tone. We weren't winking at the audience. It was legitimately correct for him. He was in such a real absurd situation, or absurd real situation, you know what I mean? Yeah. That the only way he could kind of process it was by putting it through his kind of pop culture reference filter. And then Ben Browder just so embraced that and would come up with a trillion of them himself, And he'd always try things, and he was great. I mean, he would do it the way we wrote it always, and then he'd say, "Can we try this or that or whatever?" And he came up with all sorts of fabulous references, in the moment.
How easy was he to find?
Ben?
Yeah.
Ben was. We saw a lot of guys, I gotta tell you, and Ben just came in and really pretty much nailed it, and took two guys to the network, and the other guy was a little bit more of the traditional hero type. And again, in any piece of art or film, television, music as well, when it's all done, when you hear the Beatles sing Yesterday, you go, okay, that's Yesterday, that's the way it should be sung. But you don't realize that before it existed, there was no sense of how many guitars, how much, where the instrumentals, how what all the elements would go into it. Same with any TV show or movie. So from the perspective now, Ben was absolutely right, because he's still heroically handsome, but really had kind of this edge of humor. At the time, because of the nature of the show, there was a world where you could say, okay, this kind of more straightforward actor playing this might be right to play off of the aliens in the other world, make him more of a captain, more of a heroic presence, just by his virtue of his aspect. Wrong. I mean, but you realize in hindsight how wrong that was. Yeah. And luckily, Ben, just by virtue of his personality and his humor, it became very clear very quickly, watching the two of them kind of audition for the network, that no, the life, this character's going to live in someone like him that isn't just the more iconic version of a John Crichton.
It's something that I love about John Crichton is he's not a hero at the end of his journey. He's a hero at the beginning of his journey. And casting a big macho, or a hero type would have just killed that drama. You wouldn't have had that journey at all.
But like you say, there is a world where you could see where that iconic, because you're dealing with
Buck Rogers.
Yeah.
But I think we liked that when it was in pulp. Now that we're watching it on television, we're watching it serialized weekly. We want to go on the journey with them. It's not something where you just in pulp. I mean, TV at the end of the 90s just felt like it was in this weird way where it was going towards a la carte like it is now, where you don't have to watch it every week because you can go back on DVD or Blu-ray or Netflix and watch it at the very beginning and go on the journey.
Right.
You know, so a part of me wondering if Farscape was too early was the show is so weird that someone hearing Farscape is great turns it on and ends up seeing something that is the episode of that week, and it's just too weird for them. Do you think today, in a day and time like today, where you could just go from season 1 and go on the journey with John Crichton and take all the weirdness in stride, do you think it would have a better at bat?
I think the present day, the show's continues to gather fans, and I believe they're coming to it exactly as you say. Obviously, the show's no longer in production, so they have the opportunity to start from the beginning. A friend may be watching it, and they come over and they go, "Oh, what's that?" And they're watching episode 7 of season 3, but they have the opportunity to watch it just the way they just said. I honestly don't know how it would fare even today, because it's so odd. No, it is just an odd show. I'm incredibly proud of it. This is kind of my career.
I think you told me how it got weird. It was an edict to make it weird. What was the story behind that?
We had Rod Perth, president of Sci-Fi, had bought the show. He felt he had inherited essentially a kid's show. So he called me in and we're talking. He said, just make it as strange and weird as you possibly can. So I went out with the other writers and we're looking at each other like, really? Okay. And we did.
It was while we were changing shift. There's a short period of time where that particular cell block isn't fully attended.
Rigel farting helium and all that stuff. I mean, there's so much stuff that was not in the original pilot script. And
that's in the first 7 episodes you discover that he farts helium, that Rigel farts helium. Is just, it establishes the personality of Farscape boldly, like right off the bat.
You little toad. You had to go fart helium now? I'm nervous. It happens. We're in court, so sue me.
Right off the bat, it's very different from Star Trek. It's very different from stuff that you were working on before, like Sequest, or Babylon 5, the things that were on TV at the time, Deep Space Nine. The humor is a big part of it, because the show is very loud.
Farscape was just this odd thing, and like I said, that's the very thing that created a fan base, and it is a really kind of elite group, and it's kind of in the nature of what I do, for better or for worse. And it's not like literally anything else that you've seen on television. We're proud of that.
Would you see something like you guys had Frel, and then on Battlestar Galactica when you had Frack?
What the Frel is that?
Frel you then.
Who the Frel are you?
What the Frel is going on over there?
What if Talon doesn't want us frelling with his weaponry?
Like, wait a minute, we were making up fake curse words before, but I mean, Battlestar's a great show.
Yeah.
Why can't we use the starboard launch?
It's a gift shop now.
Frack me.
Oh, frack!
You're not gonna get better lying on your back.
Oh, frack off.
I don't think they said, I watch Farscape in now, so therefore we're gonna come up with our own. There's a natural, I came up with a Frel for Farscape simply because the Australians are a lot more free with their language, and so kind of peppering with curse words, it just doesn't have the same baggage that it does here. So to kind of help the Australian actors to get their mouths around certain phrasing and really get the right energy, I just figured they need an F word, if you will.
So the last couple of years, the question keeps coming up about not only the comic books continuing, but also the webisodes. Are the webisodes to continue Farscape something that Brian and you are still passionate about? Is that something you guys are still actively pursuing?
Yeah, it's tough because everybody would understand. We do, obviously, webisodes, you don't have the same budget that you have with a TV show, and so it's a matter of trying to find that kind of balancing point where you're creating something that is very much lives in the Farscape world, and it's finding that. So it didn't work for us at that time with sci-fi. We just couldn't make that connect. But we're still working on that, and I don't want to say you're going to hear something about this in next week. But Brian and I talk often and about specific ways to kind of bring this world back. Just as he and I, as fans of the show, we want to see it ourselves. So if there's a way, I think we'll definitely find it, and we're working on it right now.
All right. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you.